All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our RBT practice question series where we're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. A gardener wants to know how much time passes between the moment they plant a specific type of seed and when the sprout first appears above the soil. They record the date and time the seed is planted and then the exact date and time the sprout first emerges. What dimension of behavior is the gardener primarily measuring? So you might see a question like this on the exam where we are thinking about behavior and behavior terminology in the context of something that isn't inherently behavioral. For instance, a plant sprouting from the ground is not necessarily what we are doing in ABA, right? However, if we read the question carefully, we can identify the idea of measurement that the gardener is using. So if the gardener wants to know how much time, first off, we know it's a time-based measurement, so we're going to eliminate something like frequency, which is a count, passes between the moment they plant a seed and when the sprout first appears. Now, what type of measurement are we using when we measure time between? Well, we're either using latency or interresponse time. And latency is typically the time in between the SD and the first response. Interresponse time is typically the time in between responses. So this should be latency. This should be interresponse time. Duration is the duration or the length of a specific response. So if we're measuring the time between, let's say we plant the seed and when the sprout first appears, that's closest to a latency. Duration, again, is going to measure the length of a response. Frequency and rate are both measuring a count, and we're measuring time. So the dimension we're looking at is latency. Again, not a standard clinical question, but when you are thinking about ABA and preparing for your exam, try to apply ABA in your real life day-to-day situations. It's going to make you better as an RBT. A client you're working with enjoys listening to music on a tablet. You're teaching them to complete a puzzle independently. Your supervisor has instructed you to allow the client to listen to music for 5 minutes only after they have completed 3 puzzle pieces correctly. This procedure is an example of which of the following? Now we're looking at this type of procedure where this client is working and they enjoy listening to music on a tablet. So we read something like that. We're thinking, okay, maybe this is their reinforcement. You teach them to complete a puzzle independently. And now you are told, let the client listen to music for 5 minutes if they complete 3 puzzles correctly. Now, that's the only information we've been given. Normally we'd make a prediction. It's kind of hard to predict in this particular case. So let's just look at answer choice A. Is this non-contingent reinforcement? Well, do we have a contingency? We do. If you want to listen to music for 5 minutes, you've got to complete 3 puzzles correctly. That is not non-contingent. The music is contingent on you completing the puzzle correctly. Are we using positive punishment? Well, no, it doesn't appear so. It appears they enjoy listening to music. It appears that completing puzzle pieces leads to the music, so it doesn't appear that positive punishment is in play. Is it contingent access to a preferred item? Well, it is. The client prefers music. They get music contingent on completing the puzzle correctly. And then is it de-extinction? Well, we're not withholding reinforcement systematically for anything, so no. This procedure is an example of contingent access to a preferred item. Remember, a contingency is an if-then statement. If you do this, then you do this. If you do 3 puzzle pieces correctly, then you get your music. You're working with the client on task analysis for making a simple sandwich. The client independently completes all steps except for the very last step, placing the sandwich on a plate. According to your supervisor's instruction to use a backward chaining procedure, which specific step will be the primary focus of independent practice and reinforcement on the next trial? Very easy question. Don't overthink it, right? We got to read carefully and attack. So the supervisor tells you use a backward chaining procedure. Well, if we're using backwards chaining, we automatically know we're going to start with that last step. So when it says what specific step will we focus on the next trial in backwards chaining, it's going to be that last step. So the question says we're working on a simple sandwich. We know the client completes all steps except for the last step. And the last step is placing the sandwich on a plate. Let's not overthink it. If we're using backwards chaining, which calls for teaching that last step, and the last step is placing the sandwich on a plate, what are we going to focus on? Are we going to focus on spreading the condiment on the bread, putting two pieces of bread together, and getting the bread out the bag? Well, no. We're going to focus on that last step of placing the sandwich on a plate. 1, that's our supervisor's instruction for backward chaining. 2, we know that's the last step. And 3, it's the one they can't complete. All signs point to C, placing the sandwich on a plate. Very simple question. Sometimes you're going to get an easy question on the exam, and you just need to trust your preparation. Don't overthink it, answer it, move on. A behavior technician who works with a young adult client at a clinic sees the client at a local gym and is invited to join them for a workout. What is the most appropriate response in this situation? So we've got an ethical question, kind of a dual relationship question, where there's a technician working with a young adult client. And let's stop there. Just because of the age of the client, that doesn't change the dual relationship rules. Now, obviously, we're speaking from a very broad perspective, right? But just in general, we can't have friendly social relationships with clients or stakeholders that we're actively working with. So if you see, or this behavior technician sees a client and the client wants to work out with them, what do we have to do? We've got to treat them like any other client or stakeholder. So A, join the client and help promote a good workout. You're not on the clock. You're not working as a technician. You are currently in a social situation. You should not join that client. B, accept the invite, but only if the client initiates the interaction. Certainly, you can have a conversation if they initiate, right? We're not going to be rude. We just can't make it a social gathering or a social outing. C, accept the invite and let your supervisor know. You should not do that. You should let your supervisor know that they asked for a workout, but you should not actually take the workout. You need to politely decline the invite. Don't think just because we have an adult-ish client that those rules change. Clients and stakeholders, it's a professional relationship only. We don't interact socially to an extent outside of our professional relationship. You're taking data on a client's hand flapping behavior. Your supervisor has defined hand flapping as rapid, repetitive movement of the hands above the wrist for 2 seconds or longer. You're asked to record the total amount of time the client engages in hand flapping during a 30-minute observation period. What type of continuous measurement are you using? Another measurement question. Now let's think about this. Well, we're taking data on hand flapping. Hand flapping is repetitive movements for 2 seconds or longer. Now you're asked to record amount of time. Once again, we're looking at a time-based recording. We're going to eliminate frequency. Right? It's not count, it's an amount of time. Now, let's go back to our little chart. SD to first response, IRT. Response 1 to response 2 in between. I'm sorry, this is latency. This is IRT. And then the amount of time the response lasts is duration. So if we're looking at the total amount of time the client engages in a response, or we're looking at duration, all right, so it's going to be B. If you break down our time-based measurements like this, where you can see the latency, the IRT, and duration all together, and then you go back and identify what the question is asking about, it becomes very straightforward. Total amount of time doing behavior, it's going to be duration of behavior. Continuous measurement is B, duration. Thanks so much for watching. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials. Make sure you subscribe. When you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.